I have so many props.
You do have a lot of props. Hello, hello, everyone. I'm gonna pull up our intro music and
Yeah.
hope that it doesn't autoplay to whatever the next thing is.
We're gonna go down Gianna's Spotify playlist.
Exactly. We're going to my Spotify playlist. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another awesome webinar with the Cybersecurity Marketing Society and Future B2B. And we have some lovely guests from Future B2B. We're getting started in just a moment. We're going to let a few people trickle in. I have to connect us to LinkedIn Live as I usually do. And then we'll get started on this fabulous Halloween style extravaganza webinar we've got going on here. So hold on, let me just put on. I mean, we have to have
You
this
gotta,
specific song playing.
yeah, you can't, it's not okay if you don't. This is
Exactly. Hold on,
the
folks.
Halloween song.
How is everyone doing? Also, we want to know what you are wearing today. Are you wearing a Halloween costume or are you dressed like a normal regular office worker, like boring? Come on, tell us. Are you in a Halloween costume? Please report from the field. Also, let us know where you're coming from, what company you're at, what role you're at, and we'll get started soon. So actually, I'm sorry I can't do music because I have a new phone. I haven't installed music on it yet. I don't actually can't. So I'm
Hang
so
on,
sorry,
maybe I
everyone.
can help.
Boring. Okay.
Yeah.
Lindsay says boring. She's dressed boring in
You're dressed
Missouri.
boring. Come on,
uh,
Lindsay.
Natasha says, okay, but why does it feel like Katie should always wear a cap and
Just
gown?
look how glamorous she is in that. Jeez.
Lifelong learner.
Lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, I got it.
All right, Jess.
I
It's
can't
got a
hear it.
weird intro. I didn't
Okay.
know that.
We can't even hear it. Can you put it right to the mic? There we go.
Vampire's feast. The all came from their humble abode to get a jolt from my electrode. They did them on
This is just what we're gonna do for the whole webinar.
the graveyard smack. On and on back.
Is there a dance for the Monster Mash? Is it the mashed potato?
Some views were heavy fun.
I actually don't know.
I don't know either. I
I'm
wish
not
I
If
did.
anyone
sure.
knows that, please send me video clips of the actual Monster Mash dance. I need to know.
Please, please do. And we are almost live, everybody. Just give us 1 second. We try not to go live before going live because then it is weird for folks to see the behind the scenes. But we'll get started in just 1 second here.
You don't think people want to see our pregame dance party? I feel like
I mean, that's true. That is very
highlight of the
true.
webinar. All downhill
Absolutely.
from here.
All downhill. Oh my gosh, I didn't say it. All right, folks, we are live. We are live on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us on this fabulous Halloween. We are so excited for today's live stream, live webinar, where we have some amazing content planned for you, all themes around the topic of content as well. So welcome. You are watching live. This is Turning Webinar Tricks into Treats. We have, of course, the theme stuff to Halloween. How to build ongoing audience engagement even after your webinar ends. That's right. It is a webinar about webinars, which we love as marketers in cybersecurity. All right. And we are so excited. I'm going to get going. Housekeeping first. We always do housekeeping. Yes, this is a Halloween episode and we're all dressed up. This is not the regular workwear. Please feel free to post in the chat. Where are you calling in from? What are you wearing a Halloween costume? And if so, what is it? And also, please keep those questions and comments rolling. The Cybersecurity Marketing Society loves interactive webinars. We love interactivity. We love to answer your questions. We bring experts to you so that they can answer your questions. So make sure to post. We have a Q&A box in Zoom webinar if you happen to be on Zoom. And we also have LinkedIn Live. So I will be watching those comments. Feel free to post. And we will get to those questions and comments during regular intervals during this webinar. Usually we let them roll, but today we realized, hey, actually, we never let our guests finish what their points are because we always bombard them with questions. So we'll be taking questions at specific points during the show. All right. Quickly, I am Gianna Whitfer. I'm moderating today and helping showcase these two amazing guests. I'm going to start first. Well, actually, I'm going to tell you guys first. Can anyone guess what my Halloween costume is?
You gotta do the thing.
Oh,
You gotta,
sorry.
yeah,
That's part of the
right?
intro. I am the CEO and co-founder of the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, but I'm also a moth today. So that is what this is. Not a reindeer, which a lot of people have been guessing, and not television antenna. TV antenna doesn't have, I think, as many feelers on it. So that's my Halloween costume. So I'm excited to introduce Jess Steinbach. You know her. You've seen her on previous webinars. Jess Steinbach is the senior webinar moderator at Actual Tech Media and Smart Brief, which is part of media company Future B2B. When I say done, I mean hosted, moderated more than 900 webinars in the last 3 years. So think about that. How many days in a work week, right? So that means she's done one webinar. You're getting claps for this. That means she's done one webinar a day, except for the days when she's done more than one, which is just incredible. She's been a guest on our show before. She's been on LinkedIn Lives before with us, sharing her engagement tips, of which she has a ton. And really interesting, like really unique and creative stuff that can be added into webinars when you're producing webinars to engage the audience. And we're so excited to have her on today to talk about post-webinar engagement. And if you do want to see our previous webinar with Jess, we have that available and we'll be sending it out as part of the recap. Jess, what are you dressed as? What's your Halloween costume?
I am the ghost of Olympics past. So I am wearing an actual 1988. This is the 88 Olympics here in Calgary, Alberta that I got. It also has like the real pins on it. And then I have a Pyeongchang torch and a Sochi flag. So, oh, and Atlanta. I have the American glasses. These are the Olympic spirit.
I love it. That is incredible. I love it's like above and beyond a regular just Olympic costume. It's like all the Olympics ever.
Yeah, we got all of them. They're all from the Olympics too. This is yeah, we might have a problem here in this house. We have too much Olympic stuff.
Awesome. All right. And we have, hi, Faye. Faye from Boston, Director of Marketing at Vigilant, which is a cyber startup. Thanks for joining us. For anyone who missed the very short, because I see more people are rolling in. If you missed the housekeeping, post your Q&A questions in the Q&A box or on the LinkedIn Live. All right. Next guest, I'm so excited to introduce Katie Moore. She is Head of Content Custom Solutions at Future B2B. And she leads the development and execution of these comprehensive content marketing strategies at Future B2B with a focus on high impact webinars and content assets that engage, educate, and drive business growth for clients. And this is fun because it's before, during, and after those webinars occur. She's also worked at Wiley, which us in cybersecurity are very familiar with. She worked at Wiley for over 16 years. And quick fun fact, she used to work on the For Dummies books, which is also really cool. Katie, thank you so much for being on. What is your Halloween costume?
Thank you for having me. My costume, I don't think I can beat either of yours, but I'm a lifelong learner and I love educational and engaging content.
We
Yeah.
love it.
In the spirit of the webinar.
I love that we got a Halloween costume, but it also matches the content of the web. Like that's how we know that you're like a top tier content strategist there. That just
Thinker.
like right
Yeah.
in.
Layers to this.
All right,
Thank-
Jess, I'm passing the mic over to you.
All right, perfect. So I did see some Halloween costume people writing in. I want to know first and foremost, we're going to test out and make sure everyone's got their emojis working. Can you give me a thumbs up if you are wearing a costume at any point today? Give us, oh no, I left my reactions on. That was so exciting.
We're getting thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Amazing. Okay, great. So we have a couple of Halloween costumes out there. Please post in the chat and let us know if you have any great ideas for last minute Halloween costumes, because we were having this discussion today and we have a few people that need last minute ideas. So if you have something brilliant that you've put together from what's in your closet, we want to hear. We're going to shamelessly steal your ideas. My second question for all of you is, we're going to get into our conversation today, and where we're kind of starting out, as Gianna mentioned, we were here a couple of months ago, weeks ago. Oh my gosh, time has no meaning
Time
anymore.
flies.
Time flies. We were here a while back, and we were talking about webinar engagement and creating an engaging program within your webinar. And today we're going to talk about how we can like stretch that out and turn that from just a webinar into a program, which is really exciting. Oh, Bert, the chimney sweep from Mary Poppins. That's brilliant. Okay, that's a great idea, David. Nailing it. And now I'm getting distracted by Halloween. So bringing it back to our webinar, when we met last time, as Jenna said, we played some games, we had some fun, and we talked a lot about creating an experience, something that in a noisy sort of virtual space where you've got lots of screens and there's lots happening, you're sort of pulling the audience member back to the experience of being here, that they walk away feeling, even if they don't remember every word that was said, they remember that they connected with a piece of information because they had sort of a human moment with a speaker. And that is what, to me, creates the most engaging webinars. So I do want to just kind of take a quick ask here, and I'm going to ask you to use the emojis again. If you're already using webinars and you're here to kind of get some ideas about how to do more with what you're doing, give me a thumbs up. If you're not doing webinars and you're here to see if you want to, do a heart. So let's see if we get, if you're currently using webinars, thumbs up. If you are brand new to webinars, a heart. All right, so I think mostly thumbs up. Jenna, is that kind of what you're getting?
I think it's all though. I don't know if I even saw a heart. I might have been distracted because a couple people are also raising their hands, which I think counts as thumbs up.
Amazing. Okay, perfect. So it sounds like for the most part, everyone here is sort of sold on the idea of webinars. You've worked with webinars and maybe you're just looking to get a little bit more out of them, which is a great place to start. And that is what hopefully we're going to recap briefly at the start and kind of explore a little bit of what we covered last time in terms of creating that engaging webinar experience. And then Katie's going to take us a little bit further in what you can do after the fact. John already kind of gave you all of my stats, so I'm not going to tell you anything more about myself. The only thing that I do want to say is that I absolutely love webinars. If that was not clear before, I'm big on storytelling. I'm big on connecting with people. I'm big on helping other people get to kind of create the story around what the content that they need to get across. And for me, webinars are an incredibly impactful way to do that. So I am coming in with a huge bias towards doing this, but I am also coming in with a huge bias towards doing webinars right. And I think that a webinar that just because you put a video camera on a person does not mean that you have created a positive webinar experience. And so I do want to emphasize that if this, and we're going to come back to that a few times, if webinars do not feel like something you can do authentically and the way you want to do them, don't do them just to check that box. So that's my number one before we jump in point.
I love it. So can we recap maybe just some of the other key points that you mentioned on the last webinar? And of course, we're going to resend that out to everybody here, but what other things were the highest, keyest points from producing a webinar first and foremost, much less creating engagement after the fact?
I think kind of two key prepping points for it. One is just in general, if you're needing to make an argument about, sort of why have virtual events. I should say, I do think that there's value in in-person events. I absolutely love conferences. I know you guys have some conferences coming up.
I know we have a conference and Actual Tech is going to be there. Actual Tech
Yes.
Media Future B2B will be at our conference. Sorry, I have to always do a plug. Go ahead. Keep going.
So go to that. Yes, obviously go to that. But I think we all know that there's some downsides with in-person events in terms of, like having to wear uncomfortable shoes and travel and pay for hotels for everybody and being away from your family. And there's a lot of value to being able to be home for the individuals that are involved. In terms of your audience, also being able to reach an audience across a global spread, the accessibility options, having different languages that you can add in for a language or for a webinar instantly, it really is incredible. So I really do think that virtual events have a place. And what I would encourage, and we kind of touched on this in the last one, I'd encourage people to think about a combination effect. So have your virtual events and then maybe do a wrap party where you take highlights from the in-person event and you explore them virtually with adding some content on, have somebody like Gianna come and sit down with somebody like Katie and watch a recording from one of your in-person events and then debrief it and discuss it and pull out some of those key highlights before or after. This is what you should look for. This is what you should have gotten from it. This is a way that you can do more with the existing content and kind of hit that 1-2 punch. So virtual events, I think, are really important. But as I said before, don't just do it because somebody said to you, we need to have webinars. If you're going to have a webinar, make sure you're putting in that time and planning for what are we trying to get out of this? Is this a one-off or is this a program? Who are we trying to reach? Who do we want to be in the room? Who's important to us? Would we rather have a small audience of exactly who we're looking for, or do we want to cast this huge wide net and hit, a lot of brand recognition? So thinking about that, because there's an opportunity for you to create a sense of thought leadership within your organization, really putting your brand out there, making sure that you are front and center in people's minds. And maybe you want to do a big wide net with that. But there's also an opportunity for you to have these one-on-one conversations with people that you maybe wouldn't have gotten in a big, vibrant in-person setting that you can get to in a small table, small round table kind of conversation. So I think those are my pre-planning webinar sides.
Love it. And I think one thing that also, so this is the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, and the audience here is largely marketers in cyber. I think some other challenge that we occasionally come across is that we have a brilliant SME and they're not really that great at speaking yet. I'm gonna say yet because I believe in the potential of everybody, but they're not really that great at speaking, or they're not enthused, or maybe the webinar doesn't have like a moderator, there's like no one guiding the conversation. Like, what can make or help, or what helps make a speaker good or a moderator good, Jess?
It's such a great question, and it's hard to give a concise answer. For me, I think it's EQ. I think, and we did, I think, get to this a little bit last time, that like I hear all the time that you need to have subject matter expertise, and yes, there are absolutely times and places and specific roles where you need to have a very, very expert speaker, and a niche expert, maybe a moderator, kind of matching them on that. But and so in your perfect world, you have somebody who's both. In the blue sky magic world where I'm an Olympic skier, we have both. But since I am certainly not, and that's not the world we live in, often you're kind of, you have somebody who's an expert and that deep subject matter expert. And then the moderator with that level of EQ, with that interest in storytelling, can help pull those slightly more authentic moments from somebody who is an expert speaker. So I think from a moderator perspective, emotional intelligence, storytelling, energy, and I don't necessarily always mean being on. I know that I'm a bit of a energy person. That doesn't fit every speaker. So, that's where, again, that EQ comes into place, or into play, is sort of adjusting so that I'm not overwhelming somebody that isn't interested in playing at that level, but speaking to them in the way that makes them feel the most comfortable. And that is a real argument for, we talked a bit about pre-recording, and I asked last time, I was making a pitch to kind of convince people to pre-record. So I'm curious if you came last time and you got to see it all, or if you're coming in fresh, I'd like to ask you guys how you feel about pre-recording. Can I get a thumbs up if you're pro pre-recording? And I think there's a rocket ship. Can you give me a rocket ship if you are anti pre-recording? I don't know why I just like
I
the
don't
rocket
think
ship.
there is a rocket
There
ship.
isn't?
Maybe let's
Okay,
do the
the
little
O
like,
face.
yeah, the face, like the like surprise
Do
face.
if you don't like pre-recording. Thumbs up if you do. Oh, my reactions are on. Okay, I'm seeing a solid mix. There was a lot more O's than I would love to see.
So
Gianna, do we have time? Do we have the ability to ask if anyone wants to come off mic and tell me why they don't like pre-recording?
okay, does anyone want to come off on mic? And you get bonus points if you also are wearing a Halloween costume. So feel free, we're gonna keep the convo going, but let me know. I'm watching this chat, okay?
If anyone wants to come out, I'd love to hear, or if you want to post in the chat, that's fine. The argument that I will make for pre-recording is, I think often this is the same thing that we talked about with webinars. The reason people think they don't like it is they don't like it when it's done poorly. And one of the things that I think happens when you're pre-recording is people have this tendency to try to be perfect. And so they read exactly what's on the script, and you get these sorts of like, if I am accessing my left-hand side, or it's the stewardess thing, or sorry, flight attendant thing of like on the right-hand side of the webinar kind of thing. and it's too perfect, it's too polished, and so it feels inauthentic. You're not getting that human connection. There are a lot of ways to do pre-recording that doesn't feel that you're disconnected from the audience, and that often comes from, and not to say like, it's all me, but from a moderator, from a video editing team, from working with a team that can put the speaker at ease. The other benefit to that is if you have multiple speakers. I saw someone say I have a hard time wrangling speakers for recordings. Wrangling multiple speakers in a panel for a live event is very hard. A recording gives you a lot. I've done recordings at 7 a.m. I mean, I hate it, but I've done it. I've done recordings at 5 p.m. But the webinars are going live. When you were saying I am in multiple webinars a day, sometimes I'm in multiple places at once because I'm pre-recorded. So I've recorded the webinar and now I can run that at a different time. So pre-recording, flexibility, a lot of opportunities for play, a lot of opportunities to get more creative in terms of the format of the webinar. Some of the games that we were talking about in our last webinar are really only possible with pre-recording. And you get the ability to stop and start. So if you have a speaker that's really nervous, pre-recording can sometimes make them feel a little more comfortable. So that's my pre-recording pitch. Did anyone give us a reason I didn't see as to why
People
they
like the
love?
energy of being live.
Yeah.
People like this sort of on spontaneity, authenticity, conversationalist. Hey, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do conversational for this one. Sometimes we do slides. Today it's like a living
Round
podcast.
table.
And Natasha's saying it's about the quality of the recording. You can have all these things in a recording. That's so true. That's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah,
This
I
is
agree.
live, by the way, if anyone's wondering. This is
We are
live.
live.
We're live. We're answering you live.
We're absolutely live. But I guarantee you, I have done recorded conversations with like roundtable conversations that we could play in this webinar that would feel the same. And a lot of it also comes down to the speaker. And so this is maybe one of the points. And I know, Gianna, we had some other things we were going to cover, but maybe we can transition a little bit more into Katie coming up soon. But I'm thinking about so game playing for me and having authentic moments with the speakers. I've mentioned that a lot. The reason that I like to do something that's more a round table or as simple as a round table is the easiest way to do it. But things like the Jelly Belly game, which if you were not here last time, you eat those they're kind of like Birdie Bots, every flavor of beans, and it's a Jelly Belly thing, and you have two different beans and they're the same color, and one color is like pomegranate, and the same color but another bean will be like barf. And they had it's like toothpaste and barf and Old Bandage, and they're terrible. And so what we did last time was we got a couple people to come on with us, and we asked each other questions, and you try to answer while the speaker and the moderator are eating these terrible beans, and it's kind of like that show Hot Ones. And what it does is it makes you physically uncomfortable. It makes you forget that you're presenting, and it makes you focus on being a human. So as a speaker, that helps kind of creating those authentic and more relaxed moments. From an audience perspective, again, it's pulling them back from they've started checking their emails, they're listening off the side of their desk, and then they're like, hang on, what are they doing there? And then they pull themselves back over to the screen and pay attention to what you're doing. So it hooks the audience back. All of these kinds of ideas, and I've made guacamole, I've done laundry folding versus backup my data. We've done, what are some other ones? Hot sauce eating things. You suffer a lot for the craft, and moderating is what I'm taking away from those. All of these were ideas that sort of, again, bring in the audience, create a human experience for the speaker and not every speaker works for that. So if you have a speaker that is uncomfortable being on camera, you have a speaker that's uncomfortable recording or uncomfortable being live, you have a speaker that does not want to be playful, don't make them do it. Don't
Right.
force that. This is again part of that planning phase. What's the most important thing? If early days in that planning phase, you decide we want to have a fun and exciting webinar, then you find a speaker who matches that. If early days you decide we want this speaker to be able to say this content, then you work with that speaker to create the experience that's going to get their content across the best.
Amazing. So Jess, I'm hoping that maybe we transition now over to Katie, just because I'm watching the time.
Yep.
And Jess did this incredible, Jess, also Ainsley Miller was on, did this very incredible, like how to create an engaging webinar during the webinar, right? Like how to make sure all the pre-planning of picking the speakers, picking the topic, like inviting the right audience, and then doing like interesting, fun things that we don't actually usually get to do in cybersecurity. Sometimes we're a little too serious. So, but we definitely want to make sure we get to the post-webinar content engagement strategy. So Jess, I'll pass that mic over.
Okay, I'm really excited that I get to, I know I'm stepping back into my moderator role here. I was speaking and now I'm moderating. I needed different hats for this. I'm excited about this, to be honest, and very truly, because as I said, I spend all of my time in webinars. And so I'm very much involved in the delivery and the sort of live moments. And then the webinars, once I'm done, I kind of walk out the door and they like continue on and have this incredible life after I've left that I don't get to be a part of. And Katie gets to help kind of make sure that these webinars that we've given life to then get to evolve and grow beyond that. So Katie, I'm really excited today to get to ask you a couple of questions about what happens to all these wonderful creatures that we're that we're creating in our creature lab.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
Katie, you ready to jump in?
Yep, I'm excited to talk about it.
Let's start with the beginning. Let's start with the first step. So I walk out of my webinar, I hand things over. What happens first?
Okay, well, first, I want to thank you and the team because you guys create amazing events for our audience, and that's where it all starts. That's where the magic begins. However, once it's over, it's not over. And I think that one of the most important rules is just to continue engaging with your audience and continue the conversations, keep the buzz going. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. And I kind of like to call it extending your spend, because once you've created this amazing content piece, there are so many things that you can do to take it one step further or several steps further, to continue the buzz and the conversation with your audience and your customers.
Well, and you clearly do an excellent job of that. We always have a lot of continuing conversations after the webinar. So I'm wondering if maybe we could get into some specifics of what that buzz actually looks like and what content should be created. And actually, Katie, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'd like to know, what is the coolest content piece that you've seen? What are you as a human most excited about?
Okay, well, all of it. I love content. I love all things content. But I think that, we have such short attention spans now, and I think that I'm seeing more trends with things that are like quick hits of information. So infographics are great for that, where you can take, the content, the most engaging pieces from the webinar with timestamps to direct your audience in and out of, where there's specific information that they can hop in and out of through the infographic without having to watch the entire event for 45 or 60 minutes, however long it is. Social snippets are great, short videos that can be posted, social graphics with some testimonials or quotes that came out of the webinar that are super engaging and important, like little nuggets of information. And then you can also take it a little bit further and do longer videos, explainers that are 5 or 10 minutes long that you can pull from that webinar. And then you can even create ebooks, white papers, short or long, articles, thought leadership pieces. One of the things that you asked about what I'm most excited about, I love creating comic books. And those can be done, believe it or not, from the content that comes from a webinar. We've done it, and it's really cool. It involves a lot of creativity, storytelling, which I love a good story. So those I get excited about. The other things that I want to mention too are things that are super easy to do with your webinar content, and they're just nurture assets where you like quickly have top takeaways, the top 5 to 10 things that came from the webinar. And then you can create even like an infographic with those. Top Q&A. What were the questions that people had straight from the audience? What do they want to know? And how did you answer? How did we answer? And then just a quick summary of the entire webinar. We call that a webinar wrap up. Basically just taking all of the information that was presented and putting it in a nice summary that's 2 or 3 pages long so that people don't feel like they have too much to go wade through. And then the CTA can just be to go watch the full webinar if they're interested.
I think we should do that for this webinar. I think we should do some of these assets for this one and then like share it with everyone who's attended so they could like see. Obviously, we don't have to make a comic book like Moth Woman versus like
mean,
Olympic
we should.
Woman versus
Yes.
Education Woman, like, like the Godzilla battle. But I love that. And I love what you said also. The video infographic, boom, mind blown. Something that takes you right to clips, like mind blown. And then top Q&A, mind blown. The first time that Jess went on our webinar and did like an emoji poll, which she did today, mind was blown. And now even more like amazing content ideas are coming out of this. So sorry for interrupting. I had to say it.
Oh, no, this is great. One thing I want to mention that I didn't say too is feedback. Survey your audience. What did they like? What didn't they like? What were they left wondering about? And what do they want more of? So that you can even create a series based on that or a next webinar. I think it's really important to get that information from your audience.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to see if I have a text layer, right? I had one next to my desk. We're just breaking the fourth wall all over the place. Now I don't have it, but I had a text layer I wanted to show.
Text
That's
layer
right.
for anyone listening is the comic book that they create.
It's
Yeah.
somewhere on my bookshelf, which is too chaotic right now. So I can't show you all, but you'll have to believe me, they're amazing. And yes, there should be a moth learning Olympic crossover episode coming
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
coming
be
in
fun.
follow-up. Well, okay. So those are some great ideas and some things to do, some kind of and I'm hoping everyone's like writing these down as things and follow-ups. What should we not do, Katie? What's the don't of content?
I think just don't leave your audience hanging. Don't forget about the people who couldn't make it, whether, they had something else going on, or make sure that you provide an on-demand version. Make sure that you're sending people an email that says, hey, if you couldn't make it, here's where you can find this information. And then also including those nurture assets, the top questions or the quick takeaways or the infographics, so that they can go, and if they're busy like all of us are and they don't have time to watch the entire thing, they can hop in and out of it. And I think that that's the most important thing, is like, do not forget about your audience, because they were there and they still need more information, and they're still hungry for that content that you can provide from that base webinar.
I just want to do a
So
quick reminder to the audience too that keep those Q&A coming. We're going to get to them soon. Don't worry. Go ahead,
yeah,
Jen.
and there's some really great questions coming in. And also we should see if we can find a link to some text layers and post that there. Ainsley, you're here. Post links, Ainsley. All right, okay, so the do's and the don'ts, great things. But Katie, if we haven't convinced anyone, because I do think sometimes like resources are short, and to the same point that we were talking about earlier, that people hear like create a webinar program. Okay, check webinar, and then all right, well we need content. Okay, we'll write a blog post after we wrap, which hey, that's better than nothing. And that's it. If you were making an argument to somebody here that they need to take to their team for why content should be an important part of a webinar program, what would that be?
I just think that, it's tragic not to take the webinar and create more things from it. I guess if we are looking at moving past Halloween, let's talk about Thanksgiving. You have your main course, you have your turkey, and you're slicing it up and serving it out, but there's leftovers. And this is the perfect opportunity to slice and dice that. My mom was a professional at this. Take it down to the carcass, and then create new dishes that are disguised so that people don't know that it's leftovers in some cases, and create something completely new. And I think that, it's to me, the webinar is just the beginning. It is the base piece of content that you can then evolve and strategize from. And so I think that that's just something that I would say that, it's a starting point.
Okay, that was really interesting what you said, Katie. If you don't mind if I double click or quadruple click on that. You said, so you did the analogy to the turkey, which is great. Turning it into something you don't even recognize that it was in the first place. So not even just like this was our webinar and here's like content from the webinar, but literally taking it and being like, this is new content. How do
Yeah.
you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have really great writers who can absorb the information, watch the webinar, make sure that they're familiar with the transcript, the topic and all of that good stuff. They're an SME, and then they can create something, a thought leadership piece. They can create articles, multiple articles. There's a lot of native content that can come from that starting point, taking the main points and turning them into something valuable for people, to an education piece or something that, you know, helps them make a buying decision, whatever the case may be. I think that a lot of times, even just watching the webinar can like spark ideas. Oh, this is something else that we could do. So I think definitely, you know, you can create net new content, and you can also take the content, like I said, and nurture the actual webinar with that content, like with the Q&A and the top takeaways and things like that.
So with the idea of the, and I saw a couple of people, somebody called out, and I love this, take it down to the carcass. That's your pull quote from Jen. That's amazing. And I think a great takeaway from Katie. She's full of nuggets like this. Yeah. Wise human. But you know, Katie, I think on that note, like, so one of the greatest things about that analogy is, you know, you're not buying a new turkey every time you want to. You told me your mom did turkey quesadillas, which was not a hit. I'm
No.
now
I mean,
I'm telling family secrets.
she would even go so far as to boil the carcass to make the broth. So, you know, you're taking it one step further.
A whole lot of stuff. But okay, but she's not buying a turkey every time she wants to, you know, have turkey broth or make turkey quesadillas. She's repurposing what she already has. So if we're approaching this from the perspective of getting the most value out of our existing webinar budget, it sounds like that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Right, definitely. I mean, obviously, we're seeing where resources are squeezed. It's really important to think about this as just, you know, a one size fits all. It's an opportunity to get every penny out of your content. And I think it's also a great opportunity to get really creative and to think out of the box. I mean, I know, Jess, you're big on that. Like, let's get creative, let's engage, let's find ways to really draw people in, and let's also listen to our customers and find out what they want and what they need and what they're looking for. And I think that that's, like I said, that's important throughout either the actual webinar, but also as a follow-up with a survey too.
Yeah, and when you say the customers, I think what's cool about that is there's two sides of that, is finding out what our clients, the vendors who come onto our webinar want, but also checking in with our audience and what
Yep.
our audience wants.
Exactly.
Both of those being very important. Katie, can I ask you a charged question?
What's that?
Did you see how
Maybe.
nervous she got, Gianna? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about ChatGPT. And so, okay, my question is, if we're talking about maximizing budgets, and we're talking about doing more with less, you know, there's an argument for like content partners, and I want to talk to you about that and best practices around that. But I do think with content creation now, there's a big discussion around how involved ChatGPT should be in your content creation. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, and if you have any sort of ideas around how that should or should not be used.
Yeah,
Loaded
I
question.
think, yeah, no, I think this is a great question and it's very relevant. I do think that ChatGPT or AI, that it's a great tool. It should be part of the tool chest that we all use as content creators. I don't rely on it though. I think that that's a little bit of a slippery slope. I feel like content should be, you know, something that's created by the human, with the human element in mind, the human experience. I think that's the best way to write really good, solid, engaging content for your audience. And I also feel like you impact search if you're just depending solely on AI generated content. I think that content that comes from AI lacks a lot of nuance, and even like in tech publishing, or especially in the tech space, you need that. You need the strategy, the critical thinking, the brand personality, all those things that come from the human side of creating content. Again, I don't think that, you know, it's not worth using as part of even a starting point, or when you're looking at creating something that is just simple, like even like a top takeaways from a webinar, you can create that using ChatGPT with a transcript, but then you need to go back and, you know, smooth it over and revise it and rewrite it. I don't think that it's something that can just be relied upon as your single generator of your content. I would be careful about that. And coming from the professional or from the publishing side of things, I also sometimes like get a little bit nervous about it because you could be quoting someone's life work without ever even giving them credit. And that to me can be, again, a slippery slope.
Such a
That's my
great
take.
point. It's a great point. You're getting some claps here. And then I think David Schreiber, who posted some comments, and also we'll get to your questions soon, Dave. David mentioned, doesn't everyone use AI to create drafts? I feel like that's a great use case for AI. And I agree with you, Katie, because we use ChatGPT at the Society. I use a Fathom note taker for my calls to transcribe. And we do always have to check. Like when something's written, we have to human verify and human zhuzh it because
Yeah.
sometimes it just sounds like absolutely weird. Even nowadays with all the advancements. So
Yeah.
totally agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
that balance. Like we talked in the recording sense, like, and everybody sort of said the people who didn't like recordings, they liked having that authentic connection with a human. They liked interacting with a human. And, an example might be something like sometimes we do a fully pre-recorded webinar, but we have all the speakers come on live and they live chat behind the scenes. So the audience is still getting an interactive experience, but the presentation itself is sort of done. I think the rough draft gives you the bones and the structure and cuts out some of the initial sort of planning that you need to do. And then you make sure that you've got for lack of a better word, your spirit is in it and your humanity is in it. I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but you do need to put a little human in that robot.
Yeah, definitely. AI can replicate the human piece of any content. So I think it's really important. Again, great tool. Everyone should use it for what they need it for, but I would not rely on it for, just on its own.
Well, I think I'm probably transitioning pretty quick here into a little bit more of an AMA with the audience. But Katie, I'm wondering, as sort of a final wrap on our conversation, do you feel trying to think of the best way to put this because I don't want to make it negative. What is sort of the downside if there's folks in the audience that aren't taking advantage of this content, or if we're flipping that to the positive, what's the incentive? What do they get out of, and they're not kind of leaving things behind if they're engaging with this content after we wrap our webinar?
Right. I just think, you're leaving so much on the Thanksgiving table if you're not taking this content and extending it. You can't put a price on great content that's informative, engaging, educational. You can't put a price on the audience who is ready to consume that content. So I can't stress that enough. I think that webinars are a really great starting point. They're a wonderful opportunity to literally create anything from there. A lot of different content pieces. And it's also a really great place to start creating additional opportunities and reach. Like I said, you're listening to your audience and maybe there's something you hadn't thought of. So it's a great place to like spark new ideas. And as far as like once that content is created, there are so many things that you can do to get it out there. Distribution is obviously key. Like why create all this content without putting it out there through social platforms and YouTube and email and newsletters, articles on websites, transcripts and videos posted. Like I mentioned, the infographics, the comic books. Comic books are great for conferences. I have to put a plug for that because people will come to the booth just because they want to collect the comic. They love a good comic book, a good story with a superhero. And we've even seen some of our clients actually dress up like superheroes, like these superheroes in the comic book and pass them out at the booth. It's a great way to bring people in to talk to you, and to learn more about what you have, to offer them in terms of products and services. And then also even podcasts. You can take the audio from a webinar and create, content for a podcast, and you can translate all of these things for global reach, or you can create print assets. Like I said, the comic books, creating print content that's based on a webinar is a great thing as well to hand out in live events.
So I love this. I think, and I like you know, when you were saying, okay, so like we do this like printed, but we do like a webinar and then we turn it into a comic book and then the comic book goes to the booth. Like events are content too, right? So you
Yeah.
have to think about this whole thing holistically. It's like a whole stream. How do you string that thread across every single touch point and asset? If you're going to, like you said, put budget and especially time into creating amazing webinar, like how can you make it go further? It's something that we think about at the society. It's something I thought about at my last cyber job. Um, and it's just something that I think in these days and ages helps like fill your calendar of fill your production calendar and drive more value when you actually have invested in doing some big content webinar with some like, you know, an influencer, or you paid to have a webinar program, right? Like how do you get that to go further? I absolutely agree with you, Katie. Just want to highlight that.
Well, Jenna, that's perfect. I think like that's all the questions that I kind of had for Katie. And I do have to say before we transition into the Q&A, I appreciate that, Katie, because I really do mean it. You know, I love what we create, and you love what you create, which is a really cool thing about the way that we get to work together. But I think that, you know, it's that age-old thing of like it's better because each piece is working. And I can create the most engaging webinars in the world, which let's just assume that's happening. But then if that's it, if that's all that ever happens with them, you know, that's a huge loss. And if you can create the best content in the world, but you need me to be operating on my side to give you something to work with. So I think the two sides of this coin are really important. And I know we're kind of fitting a lot into this conversation, but I hope we've given some people some good ideas, and now we want to hear from them.
Absolutely. And just because I know people, we're doing Q&A now, so don't leave because we're going to do interactive Q&A and we're going to go probably even 10 minutes over if y'all have more questions to cover. But if anyone wants to reach out to Katie or to Jess, like how do people reach you? Oh,
LinkedIn,
David, let's get to that soon. We will. Okay. So sorry,
LinkedIn
Jess.
for me, that'll work.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine for me as well.
Okay, awesome. All right. So, so I have a question to start. So, in terms of post webinar engagement, post webinar content distribution, you could do like 50,000 things, is what it sounds like. You can make videos, you could take it if everyone had a good mic, you could take it and make it a podcast. Everyone has to have a good mic. You could turn it into a comic book, you could turn it into an ebook, you could turn it into other types of assets, and then there is that question, which is kind of combo asked by a few people here in this chat. Like, one, the creation of content takes time. Two, pacing. What is a good sort of pacing or distribution calendar post event so that you're not maybe like drowning your audience in these content assets that you just created from this one piece of content?
Do you want me to answer, Jess?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, for one, it just depends sort of on what your strategy is and what all you want to create. But I would say, yes, you don't want to overwhelm people. You don't want to bombard them with everything all at once. And I think that the other key element to this is if you are creating all of this content from the webinar, you want to stretch it out. So I would say typically, clients like to sort of share something like every week or every 3 or 4 business days. I think that that's kind of key. Another thing too is that at some point you have to realize, okay, this content is a little stale. Maybe it's time to kind of re-up and do another webinar or create an ebook that then we can pull and extend content from that. So there's a lot of different starting points, but I think at a certain point, you have to know when you have exhausted your strategy and your campaign and all of these different assets.
Exactly. If you tie your webinar into a campaign, then
Mhm.
all those assets feed the campaign, and then you internally decide, okay, we've been running like we had a campaign schedule. We're doing all this content around healthcare, cyber healthcare, right? Like we're targeting a vertical. So we did this great webinar with some healthcare security practitioners, and now how long are we running it? And there'll be evergreen stuff, right, that lives on the website forever and maybe is gated or maybe isn't. And there'll be, you know, social content, and it's just how, you know, from a playbook perspective, like for example, I used to do like 3 months would be a good amount because then I could do kind of 4 things throughout the year, pre-planned in chunks if you did like themes, right, for campaigns. That's a great point.
And I
And I
agree with
think
you.
like,
Hmm?
sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that, you know, even just from the strategic, like planning perspective,
Yeah.
I always like to start with an integrated campaign. Like, I feel like you need to look at the central piece, whether it's the webinar or whatever, as that then you can create all these different things and then set your cadence based on that. And I do agree that 3 months is usually about the sweet spot for most of our clients as well.
I would love, I don't know if we can get this, but I'd love to, after this webinar, or it might take us a minute, but would love to send like a recommended sort of cadence out to everybody who is on here. Like maybe like, okay, you do your webinar and then let's do social post, social post, social post, email, 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 ebook, ebook, and then see, like kind of do like a draft. I think it'd be a fun blog post for us to put together and
And
share with
it's
everybody.
also important, and this is, and Katie, you said strategy and planning, and I think just kind of tying back to that, and what I was going to mention is I think when we talked about the webinar planning phase, the webinar planning is like, obviously my lens is going to be very focused on planning for the webinar itself, what speakers, who do you want in the room, all of that kind of stuff we talked about earlier. But the plan is the full campaign. And so what you're looking at is, what is that cadence that we want and that content, so that you're prepping that so that you can take fast action for the things that are going to happen fast, and that you can plan for that and know what that cadence is going to be. And there's an internal element of that as well, because ideally all of this we're doing, you know, in some sense for brand awareness, but let's assume we also want to monetize this in some capacity as well. So if you're looking at the sales side of it, what you're also planning for, and Ainsley talked about this in our last session quite a bit, was planning early on for how you're going to hand this off to your sales team so that you can actually monetize that as well. So part of that story and arc, and I love the idea of having a cadence. I do also think that cadence is going to vary a little bit by industry. And also depending on the buying cycle that you're working with in your industry, there might be some urgency. You know, you might be looking at, you need to do a little more content as you approach X holiday or X deadline or X budgetary renewal timeline. That tends to be the case, or compliance, you know, change that's happening. So there's greater context, and it's not a one size fits all when you're planning. I mean, there's best practices, and absolutely, but it's not a one size fits all when it comes to your content arc and your sales handoff arc.
I think this needs to be the topic of our next webinar, like a full like arc and strat like planning topic. I would love that. Sorry. And folks, if anyone else, we're still getting through questions. If anyone else has ideas for our next webinar, like what else you would like to hear about this, Haley is raising her hand. Haley, if you have a post in the chat, then make sure to post here as well, because we are going to do what we're going to eat our own dog food, and we're going to create contents off of this webinar and track what the questions are and create things based off of that, which I love doing. It's so fun. Lots of people are talking about lead handoff, which is something that we talked about in the last webinar we did with Actual Tech Media. But Jess, maybe can you talk a little bit about lead handoff from webinars? And maybe I have a
Is
thought, but I'm gonna let
Ainsley?
you talk first.
We could put Ainsley on mic.
Can
Can
we just
we?
put Ainsley hates being in the audience here because we're just like, come on up, right?
Ainsley, get on camera right now.
Yeah.
Because it is something that I think is, you know, we've talked about, like, I think kind of echoing where we went earlier, like, it's not a one size fits all. So you need to know what your particular sales team looks like. How, you know, do you have a giant team? Do you have a small team? How are you going to maximize that? But I think what would probably be the most important thing that I would say is I'm going to echo Katie. I'm going to plagiarize you shamelessly, Katie, is just not making them wait. You know, striking while the iron's hot is that big important handoff. So your sales team ideally knows that a webinar is happening, knows ahead of time that a webinar is happening. You're going to know who's in the room when you're registering people. And in our platform, we're tracking, you know, information about them in terms of the company that they're in, the state that they're in, the size of the company, you know, and you can get very specific with registration questions if you want. But the sales team is going to know how they're following up. What is their initial step? And then actually do it. You know, you have these people that have taken time out of their day. They've come to attend. And if you've got those red hot leads, the people who asked a question, the people who clicked on a poll, the people who participated in, they clicked on a handout. If you have a handout in your console, they clicked on that link. Track all of that and have a group of people that are following up with those red hot leads, but then make sure you're following up with everyone that's there. speaker. So I think that's probably about as specific as I'm qualified to give an answer to. And Ainsley, if you have anything else you want to add in the chat, I will read your answer word for word and plagiarize you shamelessly.
Another tip I'll just throw in, it's just something that I've done in the past because we're talking about SDRs. SDRs, I think, touching like the medium leads and maybe the cold leads, depending on what your own like strategy is. Hot leads can even be outreach to by your speaker, right? So say you have a sales engineer speaking or even like a dev on your company. Um, Hot leads, people who have really great questions that you think that you maybe can't address during the webinar, but also maybe make you think that they're interested in solutions or could be interested in solutions or services, reach out via the speaker, not like a random salesperson. The salesperson could be CC'd, but reach out via the speaker. And a lot of times speakers are busy, so you do have to like plan ahead and maybe even facilitate that a little. But that's another tip, SDR handoff. I mean,
And
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, Jenna, I love that, and I think personalizing as much as you possibly. I know that's easy to say, and
Yeah.
there are elements where AI can help with this as well, and personalization, and some opportunities, some platforms that do that for you. But if you reach out to them, to not reach out with like the cold sales cut and paste email, even if it's coming from the speaker, but like to reference the question they asked. If they raise their hands and asked a question, hey, you asked a great question about this. And even if you're not answering that question, I really appreciated that. As a speaker, I'm passionate about that. Whatever it is, give them something. Even if you have somebody else writing these emails for the speaker, but the speaker sends it, having that personal touch and not immediately feeling like I've put you in a sales funnel is a huge I just needed to turn my reactions off. I've got all of them. Let's see if I can get the heart one to go. There we
I think
go.
you're resonating also, Jess, because yeah. Okay, Ainsley, you're resonating because we're getting lots of claps as well. Ainsley is saying having a mechanism to differentiate leads from hot leads and hand raisers is key. Right. Not just being like, hey, like ready to buy to someone who just showed up for 20 minutes. Let's like calculate what sort of attention span and interest each person has.
Yeah.
And then having content ready for different levels in the funnel. Yes, levels in the funnel before the webinar helps also. Know how you are going to distribute your content after is important. Lay the groundwork for some of the tools Katie mentioned during the webinar so that they expect to hear from you because inbox Hades is like inbox HE double stop hockey sticks is a real thing. That's true. If you say I'm going to follow up with you on this webinar, which I have said multiple times, so you know, pre-block me in your inbox. I'm just kidding. So keep an eye out. Is something I think that matters. And there was a bit of a talk about the funnel as well in your comment, Ainsley. You know, Katie, maybe you have an idea on this, like content assets tied to funnel. Is there I know that like a content, like an infographic can be about anything. So it could be like buy our thing, and then it could be like what is cyber, like on the far end, tofu, mofu, or bofu. Is there any sort of strategy for sending content to maybe more of the hot leads? Like what sort of content maybe ties more to the hot leads as opposed to like the middle, like the medium leads? Is there
I
anything you've
think
seen in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the content that is more specific and it's not as high level. It drills down more into what people really want to know, especially if they're making, like you mentioned, a buying decision, or if there's been a product launch and somebody really wants to know, like, what are the updates and how is that going to impact my business and what's different? And I think, and what makes this better or sets it apart from other things that are out there. I think that those are the pieces that are definitely going to be better for the hot leads. And I think too, Jess made a great point as well. Like for those leads, you do want to have more of those, like, I guess, authentic conversations, whether it's with an SME or a speaker or someone, who isn't going to just give a high level sales pitch. It's somebody who really wants to get in there and have a conversation about the technology or the specific product or service.
We have one, David, before you drop, we have one more thing. There was a question. Someone was curious to know how many folks on this call have found the effort of breaking long form webinars into short videos truly useful. I know some folks have to drop. Can we do a very fast sort of like emoji poll? If you have actually broken your webinar into short form content and distributed it, has that been useful to you? Has that resulted in good results for you? Can some folks do some emoji reacts if that is sounds like you?
What do you want? Like a heart if we have?
I think a heart.
Heart if we have.
Heart. I mean, personally, I have, like the society has. So for us, we take our podcast, since we do our, oh, look at all the hearts. So since we do our podcast on video, it's almost like its own content. Like it's almost like a webinar, but not live. And then we'll put it on YouTube slowly because it takes us a long time. We'll put on YouTube, but what we do quickly is we clip it into very short form social media posts. And when you're doing a webinar, and because it's involving humans, what you can use is like the distribution channel of each of those humans as well, right? So if you're doing a webinar with a couple of folks, Jess, you've got like a CISO and you've got like an SME and you've got a product company on, all of those people have their own audience, like post webinar offline in their own circles. So if they can share content about themselves from the webinar, like that just expands the engagement and the reach beyond. Sorry. I feel like I give speeches and I'm not trying to. I'm really not.
It's hard not to get on a like, excited soapbox about some of this stuff because it is truly exciting. God, I'm such a hand talker. I never realized how much I talk with my hands until I turn my reactions on. But it's so exciting, and some of these things I think that really speak to sort of passion points within us. So that's why we're all getting on our speech mode today.
Another short form content too, if you did a webinar and you have a short clip video, people can comment with those in LinkedIn. So you can, like, I think a lot of the social platforms are getting very video heavy, even LinkedIn. I don't know here if anyone here has LinkedIn Talk, like ability to do like LinkedIn TikTok. Would love to hear what you guys have experienced about that. Um, but there's all this short form content that can be used even on social platforms beyond just posting on your own. You know what I mean? That too.
I did a TikTok dance, Jenna. It was great.
Did you? Oh, I didn't
It was
even
the
notice.
highlight of the webinar.
Oh, geez.
I don't know TikTok dances. I legitimately don't. Thriller. I want to call out because Olivia made a comment about the webinar she'd like to see come being a discussion on promoting webinars. And Katie and I had talked about this too. I feel like we're going to throw our colleague under the bus, but I want to hear audience. I want to hear our team come in and talk about like how to get your audience in the room, how to promote the webinar. So I hope that's the one that we do next.
Okay, cool. We'll have to do a poll or something.
Plus
That would
one
be
to
great.
Olivia's from me. Ainsley, write that down.
We have more questions from the audience. Can y'all stay on a little late, like 10 after? That's what I said it earlier, but okay, we'll keep
I can do a
going.
few more.
And we're going to turn this into a big Q&A, and we're going to turn it into an FAQ, and we're going to turn it into a LinkedIn, like an Instagram video and a reel, and send it to you guys. So here's an anonymous ask, can you share tips for finding the right cadence, i.e. how many webinars per month / quarter? All right, more cadence questions. People have lots of cadence questions. We're a small startup and don't want to overburden our SMEs. I've been there. And my SMEs got to like either love me or hate me based on how you approach this. Don't want to overburden our SMEs, but also want to make sure that webinars are freaking enough to make an impact. So what are your thoughts, Jess, Katie?
One quick thought that pops to mind is that I will say this could potentially be an argument for pre-recording. There is a little bit of magic of cinema you can do with your SME, like changing your shirt. So you could get together for a 3-hour webinar or a recording session or 2-hour recording session, and you have them bring 3 different shirts and they record 3 different 20-minute sessions, and then you use them throughout the month. So if that feels easier for the SME, sometimes that's too much. But especially if it's an arc, then they can kind of reference back to each one while it's all still really fresh. Arc being the key, and you can knock them all out. That is one possibility. I do think that you can overextend your audience. So I certainly, as much as I love webinars, I do not advocate for more is more. I think that, so I wish I could give you like, you shouldn't be doing more than 3 a month. I think that you have to gauge what is the story that you're trying to tell. If you have a key sales cycle that you're trying to hit, that might be a shorter timeline and you might need to do more in a month. What I would consider you to do if you're thinking about your organization is to look at the year and think about 2 things. What do you want to tell? And what does your audience want to hear? And, that sounds like a really basic thing, but like, when is your audience making key purchasing decisions? When is your audience making decisions for their business? And make sure you're hitting those. And then does that line up with the stories that you need to tell? And then base your cadence off of those things. And that would be a starting place. That's a little vague. I apologize. It's hard to get more specific without getting into specific industries. But Katie, do you have anything that you'd want to add to that?
I was just going to say that you can do, your own strategy based on how you want to present your webinars and the cadence for your webinars. But I also think too, you can plug into existing multi-client or multi-vendor webinars.
Yeah.
And that is a great way to still have that exposure, still get your messaging out there, still get your leads. And I think that, you may be sitting beside some of your competitors, but that's great. That gives you an opportunity. So I think that there's also, there's two different ways to go about it. There's your own custom webinar that you're doing, and then tying into the multi-vendor model where, you're in an ecosystem with others.
And actually, both of those could be on external. Like, if you're doing stuff internally, that's amazing, but you could also double your value by working with external partners like us. We do this where you could send us that content. You could send us the subject matter expert, and we can hit our audience and we can hit our platform. And now you're using a more vendor agnostic, neutral platform to reach the audience, which kind of separates out from your audience a little bit, and hits in a different way. The multi-vendor thing, I just have to hit on really quickly because we did not talk about this at the start. We do single vendor and multi-vendor. When we say vendor client webinar, so a single vendor would be like us here today, or Katie and I would be the single vendor if that we were looking at it that way. In a multi-vendor, it would be more like a conference, a tiny little conference. And the way we do it is about 25-minute presentations from each vendor. And so that lift is very light. We also have a way that we do it called an expert series, where you get like a little sponsored clip at the start that we read out for the sponsor, and we provide the expert speaker. So it's more like a radio ad that you're placing at the front of somebody else's expertise. So there's ways that you can put yourself into the webinar game that are a little different than just, I will create webinar, I will publish webinar, done.
Love it. Mix up your audience, find new audiences, don't burn out your audience. Priyanka we just have very little time left. Priyanka wants to know mic recommendations. I'm going to pass it over to you, Jess, to send that, or actual tech team to send some mic recommendations after also.
Yep.
I don't know if you have them right off the top of your head, but
we use an Elgato. I really like it.
There we go.
But my biggest recommendation for like setup, two things. One, lighting. I have key lights. I'm sure you can see them in my big reflective mirrors I'm wearing today, but I have key lights on either side of me. I would make sure you have some kind of diffused light. I do have a window. It's shut all the time. Don't use natural light. It also makes it really hard when you're recording because your light will change. So key lights, good microphone, good camera is key. I'm not even using my best camera today. Our production director is going to kill me later. But having a nice camera, and then I stand when I'm doing webinars. Now that's a comfort thing for me. Not everyone is comfortable with that, but for me, I find that it allows me to project, and it allows me, as I've said a couple times today, I'm a hand talker. It allows me to hand gesture. So for me, standing is really great, but lighting, sound, and obviously a good camera.
I literally broke everything except for standing. I am standing like on today. And I gotta learn from you, Jess, because you're like the pro, and like I need to level up this background here. I'm sure everybody's sick of it. Added the neon sign, and that's it so far. That's the only change in the background for
I love
like
the
4
neon
years.
sign.
I love the neon.
Thank you. Everybody get a neon sign. I can
You
give
can
a
do
recommendation.
our production director has a neon sign, and then he has a dark background. It's not quite as hacker-ish as it sounds, but it looks super cool because he has lighting on him, and the neon is like this nice pop in the back. It's good.
Awesome. We have 2 minutes. I know Jess is a hard stop. Olivia, Deborah, thank you so much for your suggestions. We are going to keep doing these, so keep an eye out on your email. And the society is launching a better and improved sort of webinar experience and virtual content experience starting in 2025 after our conference. Of course, our experience is going to be amazing at our conference, and we do a pretty good job here too already, but it's going to be even better next year. There is a few more questions, but I don't think there's like quite a few more questions. I don't think we're going to get to them. Jess, We'll follow up with you, question askers. Jess, Katie, thank you so much for being on today. Any last closing thoughts?
I'll let Katie be the grand finale, which she'll hate me for
No,
later.
I just want to appreciate, or I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you having me here today. This has been really fun, and I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'm excited to see the questions and create some additional content based on this webinar.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And
love it.
Jenna, I want to say thank you to you for having us back. I know last time, and the reason that I was even involved in this one today at all was A, because as we said, Katie and I are two sides of the same coin here, but B, because we had so much to cover in the last one. And so for anyone that has been to both of these, thank you. I'm so glad that you were here for those sessions. And I really hope that we've hit on, I think it's really easy to get focused on the wrapper around the webinar, and it's super important. I'm not discounting any bit of it, but I really want to make a plug for that planning phase, including the webinar itself and including the follow-up and including the sales, and really putting that time in at the start, because I promise you, if you put that time in ahead of time, I've said time like 15 times. If you put that time ahead of time into the planning, it will help you get the most out of the time you're putting in to the webinar and what you're putting into the content and what you're putting into the sales. And then people wonder why their webinars aren't working. And it's often comes back to 15 steps earlier when you just said, oh, we booked a calendar or we put a webinar in the calendar, so we're doing that and that's happening. And then that was as far as, okay, now we have a speaker and now we were going to go live and that's it. So if I could have everyone walk away with one thought, it's please walk away from this session and look at your own webinar program and make sure that you understand why you're doing it, when you're doing it, who you're inviting into the room, and what you're doing with it afterwards.
Love it. Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you everyone for attending. We'll do more of these and we'll answer all of the questions that were posted in the chat and in the Q&A. Expect follow-ups. And like I said, see if we're going to eat our own dog food. Let's make some assets from this. We're going to send it to you. You tell us, I like that short asset or not. We'll try. Thanks so much, Jess. Thanks so much, Katie. Thank you again, Actual Tech Media, a future B2B company, for being a partner of the Cybersecurity Marketing Society. We could not do it without you, and we appreciate you. Talk to everyone soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.